It's one of the best things that we ever did for our marriage that we are ready. Hi guys, and welcome back to my channel. So today I wanted to talk to you guys about sleep training. We have sleep trained all three of our boys, so I want to give a little bit of a background just in case this is you right now. When I had my first son, I was very against sleep training. I was like, what? Putting a baby on a schedule? Like, that's impossible. You shouldn't do that. That's like working against nature. I don't know why I thought that, but that's just the opinion I had formed. I thought sleep training was just simply letting your baby cry all the time. I didn't actually really know much about it. I just knew I wasn't for it. Now what I've learned years later is that we all crave routine and we all crave a schedule, even newborns. I've come to realize that all babies will technically sleep train. The question is, are you gonna let your baby sleep train you? Or are you going to sleep train your baby? So sleep training is really all about working with your baby's natural schedule and also working with your own, basically combining them together to create a sleep and eating schedule. I usually wait until my baby's well over the 1 month point. So if you're watching this and you have a newborn baby, just take your time snuggling that baby, enjoy lots of skin to skin, take advantage of this downtime that you hopefully have. Don't stress yourself out with trying to create a really strict schedule or regimen right now while you're in the newborn phase. Wait a little bit longer until the baby's a little bit older before you try to implement any sort of schedule or very consistent routine. So I've done both Baby Wise and Moms on Call. My first two kids I used Baby Wise. My third I used Moms on Call. The biggest difference, I feel like Baby Wise really teaches you the whys behind schedules. Baby Wise is way more in depth when it comes to teaching your baby how to sleep. There's also an absolutely amazing blog. I highly recommend her blog and I'll link it below. She has been a lifesaver for all three of my children. The Moms on Call schedule is the one that I'll be referring to and the one that I'm using this time around. Here are the basics when it comes to sleep training. You're swaddling them. You're making sure there's some sort of white noise machine, or we use a rain machine. You have the right amount of wake time. This is the time that the baby's awake in between naps. And you're following the wake up, eat, play, sleep schedule. I used to assume that all babies need to be nursed to sleep, and that is not the case. I know some people choose to do that, but just know babies don't have to do that. Your babies may have sleep trained you and them to have to nurse before they go to sleep, but they don't technically have to if you teach them not to. It's a choice, of course. So as a mom, if you're choosing to nurse your baby in order for them to go to sleep, that's totally fine. Do what works for you, but just know that this method I'm suggesting is saying not to do that because it doesn't teach your baby to go to sleep on your own. It is very rare that any of my children wake up in the middle of the night, even the baby. If they do, we know something's really wrong, and I always attend to them right away because I know that's not something that's consistent for them and that's not something they normally do. Your goal with using these methods is to teach them to sleep happily on their own, and it does take time. If they do cry or fuss, it's like a whining for 3 to 4 minutes. So if I were to tell you that you just simply have to give a little bit of crying time to your kids, and as a result you get 12 hours at night of sleep, my question to you would be, is that worth it to you? It may not be, and if that's the case, then that's fine. But for me and my kids, to me that has been worth it. During this first video, I'm going to talk about a few different schedules that we used for the first few months of his life. From about 0 to 5 weeks, I follow a very loose newborn schedule. I wear them to sleep, I hold them to sleep, I lay them down to sleep. Basically whatever baby wants, I give them. If I need to do stuff with other kids, then I'm wearing them to sleep if they want to be worn. If they'll let me sit down, I will, but if they fuss, I'm not pushing it. My goal is to let them get as much sleep as they possibly can. During that first month, they are very clingy, and I think that's part of their natural development. I do try to make sure I feed them and then keep them awake for a little bit before napping them, as well as making sure that they don't go past the recommended amount of time you're supposed to feed them. I believe that's about 2 to 3 hours, so I try to follow that as much as possible, and I do wake my babies to eat, even as a newborn. That way they can be gaining weight so that you can go to a sleeping through the night schedule, which I'll get into soon. I'll also try and have a loose bedtime. So what I mean by that is I'll try and like get them in their PJs, get them kind of like relaxed, turn off all the lights, I have a sound machine going, and I have like basically everything prepared for them to go to bed for the night, even though I'm still nursing them every 3 hours. We have made a few exceptions where the baby's just like really struggling and just wants to be held during that like 7 p.m.-ish time frame. And occasionally my husband and I would be sitting in here watching like a movie or a show, and one of us would be holding the baby. And then when we went to bed later on, like closer to 10, sometimes that's when we actually put the baby down for bed. That was not a habit we continued past like the first handful of weeks, but during the beginning, like I said, be very loose with your schedule, very gracious with yourself and your spouse and the baby as you guys guys are learning this all together. I make sure that whenever I do any feeds throughout the night, I try to keep the lights very dim and do minimal talking. Try not to talk or stimulate your baby too much, just because you want to communicate to them like this is sleep time. This is a quiet, gentle time. If you are in the middle of that newborn phase and you have like a 2-week-old, it is a rough time. So I've been there and I understand, like, it is hard. You're so sleep deprived, but you're still having to wake up to feed your baby every 2 to 3 hours, and that is absolutely exhausting. Just remember, it is such a short season. It will be over soon. Just try to keep reminding yourself that this season will pass, a new one will come. Don't let yourself get too discouraged. My babies were very hard to wake in the middle of the night. They also all had jaundice, and that makes your babies extra tired. If your baby does have jaundice, it is really, really important that you're feeding them regularly, because the only way they can get out that bilirubin is through their poop. So you need them to poop, which means you really need them to eat. So don't skip out on any feedings, no matter how tempting it is, because you're sleep deprived and you just want that sleep. Usually what we would do is my husband, he would go ahead and get up the baby, change the baby, wipe his little booty down with a nice cold wipe. I know that sounds so cruel, but it does wake them up and it does help. If my babies were really, really tired, he would go ahead and take off their clothes so they were just in their diaper. So go ahead and nurse them, like I said, in just their diaper. You can tickle their feet or rub their hands. So like their hands are usually up here, so it's not too hard to take your hand and keep rubbing theirs, and that will help continue to wake them up. Same thing with rubbing their feet. You can also have dad help with this. You can have him help rub their hands and their feet to keep them awake. It's a really great way to involve him and also not have to carry that burden all by yourself of trying to keep the baby awake. I definitely would recommend not nursing them too long. 30 minutes kind of max, 30 to 45 if you're really struggling, but definitely don't let them be nursing for like an hour or anything, because you'll throw off the entire night schedule. Feed them. When they're finished, go ahead and put their clothes back on and put them right back to bed. And then obviously try again at the next feeding time, 2 to 3 hours later. My biggest suggestion would be during the day, really try to keep them where it's well lit and around lots of noise. That way they realize that it is still daytime. My third born Levi really struggled with this. He got his days and nights mixed up. So basically he would want to try and sleep really long stretches during the day, and then he'd want to feed every 2 to 3 hours on the dot at night, all night. Obviously, I didn't want this happening. I would much rather him want to feed every 2 to 3 hours during the day, instead want to sleep longer stretches at night. Most babies lose a little bit of weight that first week after they are brought home. So once babies are back to their birth weight and have passed that, most doctors agree that it's okay to start letting them go longer stretches at night. Obviously, check with your doctor before trying to go longer stretches or feed them longer times. Like if your doctor has told you your baby needs to gain weight and you need to feed them every 2 hours, definitely go with what your doctor says. Please don't listen to me. Listen to your doctor. Make sure that they're not taking that 4-hour stretch during the day. So set alarms and remind yourself, because like I mentioned, you want them eating frequently. So if they use that 4-hour stretch during the day, then you really shouldn't let them go a 4-hour stretch during the night. So that's an overview of what I do as a loose newborn schedule from 0 to 5 weeks. The next schedule I'm going to talk about is the 3-hour eating schedule from about 4 to 8 weeks of age. I started this around 6 weeks. Like I mentioned, I really just love to cuddle my newborns. In a minute, you guys are going to see some video footage of me starting to sleep train my baby at 6 weeks old. One thing I forgot to take into consideration before filming that is that a lot of babies have a growth spurt around 6 weeks old. That means that they are cluster feeding. And if you don't know what cluster feeding is, it's just basically where your baby starts wanting to nurse more frequently. Nothing is wrong with you. It's not that you're not making enough milk. The baby is basically trying to boost your milk supply. If your baby is truly fussing and wanting to eat, please feed your baby. Definitely feed them if they are acting very antsy and very visibly hungry and they can't be consoled in other ways. I took about 2 full days to transition him to his crib in his own room. So this is the general overview of the schedule that I follow. I will wake them up and not let them sleep past the 6 to 7 time frame. This is really important to get your day going and to stay on a consistent schedule. Usually I would wake the baby up, go ahead and feed them, and most of the time they would go almost right back down after I fed them and changed their diaper. Then I would wake them up at 9 a.m. and feed them again, so that's about 3 hours later. Once I'm done feeding them at 9:30, I will go ahead and play with them. Now, playing with a newborn is very different, obviously, than playing with an older child. It just means stimulating them. You have them on the ground and you're talking to them. You could even be reading books. It's usually only about 30 minutes because they're only awake 1 full hour from when you got them up for that feed. The feed does count as part of their awake time. At 10 a.m., you'll go ahead and put them down from a nap, and you continue this throughout the day, so you kind of get the gist of the schedule. 12 p.m., you do another feed for about 30 minutes. 12:30 is playtime. 1 p.m. is a nap again. 3 p.m. is another feed. 3:30 is playtime, 4 is nap time again. Then you wake them up closer to 5:30 to 6:30, and then at 7 p.m. I put my babies to bed. I then wake them up for another feed. Moms on Call recommends pumping and having dad give a bottle just to really stuff them full of milk. I did enjoy giving my husband a bottle to feed the baby. However, for my body, I found that my supply started going down. I went from pumping I think it was a solid 4 ounces, a little more than 4, to I got all the way down to 3, and I could tell he was still hungry after I had given him the bottle of milk. If this happens to you, the quick solution is to just nurse again. I stopped doing the bottle and immediately my supply went right back up. The next feed would then be around midnight, and then the next one would be at 3 a.m. For these 2 feeds, I would go into the baby's room, the lights would stay dark, pick them up, usually keep them swaddled. Occasionally, some people talk about unswaddling their arms. Do whatever you need to do, especially if you need them to actually keep eating and they're not waking up. The key is that you're not waking them up too much. It's a very gentle feed so they know it is nighttime. It's not playtime, it's not time to talk and coo to mom. Slowly, I would drop the midnight feed first, and then over time, that 3 a.m. feed moves kind of closer to 5 a.m. Once that one feed is to 5 a.m., your baby is days away from sleeping through the night. That means they are super, super close. If you hear them fussing for that feed around 5 a.m., try giving a passy a few times to see if that can soothe them until about 6 to 7 a.m. And if you can do that for a couple days, they will start sleeping through the night until 6 to 7 a.m. You kind of just have to see if they can do it. Remember, you're trying to teach your baby that their stomachs don't need to be consistently full all throughout the night. In 1 week, we went from 2 feeds at night to none at all. So less than 7 days is all it took for Levi to start sleeping through the night. Here are a couple tips and tricks for getting your babies to go to sleep, as well as a couple tricks for the middle of the night when you're trying to transition them out of certain feeds. You're gonna make sure, like I said, you have a sound machine, you have a really good swaddle, and you have a dark room. You can choose to use a passy if you want to. I really tried to save the passy for when the baby absolutely needed it. I tried not to give the baby the passy 24/7. And as you'll see in a minute, I would bounce the baby or pat their bottom and sway them standing up, trying to get them to go almost to sleep. Here's the key. You're not rocking them to sleep or swaying them all the way to sleep. I had a mirror to the side that I used when I was holding my baby to be able to see if his eyes were starting to close. So I would keep swaying him and rocking him. It was usually about 5 minutes until I started to see his eyes droop. And when he started doing that slow blink without saying anything, I would go ahead and lay him in his crib and then walk out of the room. If he fussed or cried, I let him fuss for a select amount of time. I started with 5 minutes and slowly worked up to longer than that as he got older and as I felt more comfortable. So in the beginning, sometimes it was only 3 minutes before I went back in there and did it again. If 5 minutes have passed and they still aren't asleep yet, go in there and repeat it. Pick them up, don't do anything crazy, don't talk to them too much, keep it dim. Do it again. Sway, bounce, rock, whatever it is. And when their eyelids are getting kind of almost closed, not asleep, very important, you lay them down. Then if they fussed again, I would increase that amount just a little bit. It would usually only take 2 times, maybe 3, and they would be asleep. This is how you first start sleep training and get them to go to sleep on their own. This is not something you plan to continue up until they're 2. This is just for this time as you're teaching them to fall asleep in their bed on their own. Be sure to watch your awake times or your play times very carefully. If you keep the baby awake too much, you can actually cause them to have a harder time going to sleep because they are overly tired. An overly tired baby does not sleep longer or better, contrary to what people have told you. Just because you keep your baby up later does not necessarily mean they're going to sleep longer or sleep later. So try to consistently keep to that 1 hour wake time during this 4 to 8 week old sleep schedule. You may need to adjust it for your baby. Some babies can use a little bit more, some a little bit less. My baby during the first few weeks definitely was closer to 45 minutes to an hour. So if your baby is only napping at very tiny intervals, you need to stimulate them a little bit more and keep them awake for that solid hour. If you wear your baby, they will fall asleep. I know it's hard to do if you're dealing with other kids, but if there's any way you can put them in a bouncer or put them on the ground or something to keep them awake, they will sleep much longer and much better. So I completely avoid trying to wear my babies during that 1 hour wake time unless I need them to nap. In the evenings, a lot of babies have a really terrible witching hour. My kids all have. So during that last afternoon nap, a lot of times I just wear my babies because it's easier than trying to fight them to go to sleep and stress myself out, especially when it's the end of the day, I need to make dinner, my kids are all cranky. Your goal is to teach your baby how to sleep. It's not gonna happen right away in the first day, but the goal is that you're taking step towards them sleeping through the night. But wearing them to get to sleep during that last nap is not a bad habit. If you're doing that for every nap, that will create a bad habit. Just a heads up. Basically, the goal for that last nap is you do whatever you need to get them to go to sleep. A note about bedtime, I tend to let them fuss a little bit longer, closer to the 10 to 15 minute side. The reason for that is they tend to be a lot more tired at bedtime. I'm not sure why, but it seems like they just need a little bit more help to go to sleep. So for the middle of the night when your babies wake up, especially when you're trying to transition them away from feeds, Moms on Call recommends waiting 5 minutes before going in to soothe them or feed them in the middle of the night, and to do this 3 times before you resort to nursing them. So the reason they recommend this is to see if the baby is close to being able to go throughout the night. If the baby wakes up and they're just kind of fussing and grunting, wait 5 minutes. If you hear them still doing that, go ahead and go in, give them a passy. You could maybe try bouncing them. I don't know if I would, just because I wouldn't want to risk them thinking that I'm trying to feed them. I'd probably resort to the passy first, then go ahead and leave, see if they do it again. Give them 5 minutes of fussing, go back in, do it another time. The last time, you wait 5 more minutes of them fussing, and if they can't be consoled and they're not going back to sleep, go in and feed them. That means that they truly are hungry. Remember, this has only been about 15 minutes, so it's not like you're making them scream and cry for hours. It's just 15 minutes of them fussing to see if there's just simply fussing as they're transitioning, their sleep in the middle of the night, or if they're really hungry and need to be fed. I think a lot of times as moms, especially with little babies, we hear them fuss or grunt or cry, and we immediately want to run to our babies to see what they need. And sometimes like they just need to kind of fuss or grunt for a second. They're not upset, they're just sleeping. When you're doing this early newborn schedule, one really helpful tip is to use a passy if you need to. My babies were very strong suck-need babies, as I like to call it. They wanted to use me as comfort all the time. It was dreadful. I would nurse them for 30 minutes and then they would act like they were hungry. Later on, I learned that after 30 minutes, go ahead and try giving them a passy if they're acting like they're super hungry. A lot of times they just want that comfort of being nursed. I'm not saying to not feed your baby or to not feed them well. I'm saying once you know that they have had an adequate amount of milk, try giving them a passy if they're still acting like they just want to suck and then fall asleep on you. In my opinion, it is much better for them to have a passy than for me to get discouraged and to quit breastfeeding because my baby literally won't stop sucking. Not all passies are the same, and not all babies like the same passy. So if you're someone who's like, oh, my baby just hates passies, it's probably not true. You may just not have found the passy that they like. Unfortunately, my babies never liked those like super cutesy passies that look like the hospital ones. They absolutely hated those and they could never keep them in. The only ones they ever liked were kind of like the uglier, really colorful ones that you can get in just basically any store. I'll go ahead and link the different types of swaddles that I've used for my babies throughout the years. I do find that you really have to experiment to see what works well. Moms on Call mentions using a very specific swaddling method. I never tried it just because I'm not a fan of wrapping my babies to swaddle. They would always break out no matter what, and it was so stressful to have to go and like wind them back in. But if I did have another baby, it's probably something I would try. So maybe look into that to see if that method of swaddling would work well. One important key thing to note is that a lot of babies start rolling around 3 to 4 months old. So if you are using a swaddle in which their arms are bound in, you need to transition them out of that schedule by 3 months old so you don't risk suffocation. There are some transition swaddles that you can use, which is why there's a few brands I love. My babies are big Malvi babies, so having their hands up was really important. I know this isn't a method that works for all babies, and I don't know if Moms on Call is like a big supporter of it. We've never had trouble with the hands up swaddle, but I think the key is that you have something tight so that they're not startling themselves awake. It's called like a startle reflex. So if you leave your baby on swaddle, just keep in mind they will wake up throughout the night a lot more than if you swaddle them. Also, please, if you haven't already, I just wanted to stress this, definitely read up on just different sleep practices for safe sleep with newborns and babies. It's just so important that of us attempting to start sleep training. I think I finally have decided that we are ready. Little boy has been doing really well at night, only waking up about once in the middle of the night, occasionally twice, like very early in the morning. And he's finally starting to show signs of going longer stretches. At this point, we have been to the doctors multiple times. We have been keeping an eye on his weight. His weight is really good. He's in like the 77th percentile for weight. I usually want to make sure that their weight and everything, you know, is established before trying to get them to go through the night, just because if they need those extra calories, I really shouldn't be taking those away from him. At this point, he is mostly just eating out of habit and for comfort. So Levi slept a couple nights almost completely through the night. I think he slept about 6 hours or so. And so I felt like that was a good sign that he is getting close to that point of being able to go longer stretches if I were to push him. So we're on the same floor as him, just around the corner, and he has been next to my bed up until this point. I feel like once babies start going an extra long stretch, it's really helpful to go ahead and move them to their own room, because at that point, a lot of times when you're coming in at night, because I put my babies down kind of early, when you're coming in to go to sleep, a lot of times you'll stir them or wake them. And so when they're in their own room, I think it's good because you can't really wake each other up. Plus, anytime the baby grunts or just, makes a little bit of a noise, it like startles you awake. And I think sometimes that causes you to immediately like jump in and want to do something to console your baby. They're kind of just waking up in the middle of the night, just, stirring, and they just need to go back on their own, just like we do as adults. I am planning on doing the Moms on Call schedule this time. I've done Baby Wise so far and it's worked great. And it's not so different that I feel weird changing something that has worked so well for us. I just have had a bunch of friends say how great the Moms on Call schedule and method is. Here is the schedule that I am planning on loosely following. So essentially the baby is going to wake up, eat, be awake for an hour, and then go down for a nap. And you do that all day, every day. But I feel like with him being still so young, he's only 6 weeks old, that sometimes I follow that pretty loosely. So I try to keep him awake for the hour. However, sometimes he'll wake up a little bit earlier from his nap, and if he's really struggling going down, there's been a few times I just stick him in the baby carrier and he goes right to sleep. Just that way I can get him to push that nap a little longer so he's not asking to be fed earlier and he throws off the schedule. Obviously, if he's starving or I can tell he's going through a growth spurt, I'm not going to deny him the food. However, a lot of times he's just so used to waking up and getting fed that he's just like, all right, I'm awake, I'm ready to be fed an hour early. And I'm like, nope. So it is currently about 1:45. He has been sleeping in our room next to my bed, like I mentioned. So I may actually try a nap for the first time in his room today. Once he wakes up, hopefully really close to 2. If he wakes up between 1:45 and 2, I will go ahead and feed him. I definitely won't try and make him stretch it. They usually say like if you're going to feed your baby, so let's say your schedule is to feed your baby at 2, then you kind of have like a 15-minute window before and after 2 to feed them in. So like I wouldn't let him sleep past 2:15 and I won't let him eat earlier than 1:45. So it's like if you can do it within that time frame, then it won't throw off your body or their body clock. So I'll try my best to kind of document what that's like. It's quiet right now because it is nap time and rest time for all my babies. I will do my best to document some of that, but it's a little crazy here right now because there are 3 little boys now. I am fully outnumbered and outhand. Little guy. Levi. One thing I wanted to mention that you may have caught up on is that he was waking up at 2. So we were actually an hour behind the schedule that I want us to be on. And that is because I believe he's going through growth spurt. So they go through growth spurt around week 6 and they tend to nurse a little bit more and sometimes cluster feed. And so he was doing that last night, of course, for like 2 hours last night. So that definitely threw off some things, but I had already planned on kind of filming some of this. So just know that even though the time is off, the same schedule applies. So it really doesn't matter, I feel like, when you're first starting out as to when that actually starts, just that you're kind of keeping to that rhythm. I find that if I am too quick to put him like in a carrier on me like 30 minutes after he's eaten, he will sleep. The problem is that then he only sleeps for like 30 minutes. So if your baby is not sleeping long enough, try extending their playtime. You can find a lot of information on that with like Baby Wise and some of the other ones. Really random side note, you do hear him clicking a lot. He does have a little bit of a tongue tie, so unfortunately little guy is probably gonna have to get his tongue tie clipped. Hey little guy. You trying to stay awake? Can you say hi? You wanna talk to him?
Happy for baby was go. Very good.
You're gentle. Very gentle. Not on him. Very gentle.
Yeah. Me. This side. No.
Don't pick him up. Be gentle. Very gentle. Okay. So it's already 2:40. I'm gonna do some holding him and just trying to keep him awake for the next 20 minutes. What were you doing? Oh, show me. What are you doing? Is that your baby? You're gonna feed your baby? Can you show me? Are you feeding him?
No.
So I was right. This little one is in fact going through a growth spurt because he is currently cluster feeding. So I fed him at 2, and at 2:40, right after I did that clip and he was fussing, he really was mouthy, and so I was like, let me just see. And he's definitely eating. So so I would recommend probably not doing this during the 6-week growth spurt mark. Hi. Really? You were not supposed to be up there. Oh man. Okay, so it's 2:55 and he just started crying. I believe he's sleepy. Hey, buddy. Are you getting sleepy? Just sat him down. First time he's ever been in that room. The first time we've had a little baby in that room. He'll probably cry in a few minutes. So I just kind of was helping him out until he was getting drowsy. He wasn't fully asleep yet. And then I was laying him down so he can finish falling asleep. Occasionally he will start crying because it kind of wakes him up a little bit. But I've been doing this whenever I've been putting him down this week, just for a couple times a day. So I haven't been napping him in a crib or bed every day. But when I do, I try and do that. So I'm just trying to kind of show him, like, help him get sleepy, and like he can finish going to sleep on his own. If he does start crying, I'll keep an eye on the clock. I am going to give him like 5 minutes to cry, and then occasionally 10, because I've been doing it a little while, but I started at 5, and then I kind of went in there and, you know, jiggled him again and tried laying him down. There was a couple times where he cried for like 5 to 10 minutes and was not, like, he was almost asleep. I went in and I did that little jiggle thingy, and he was out pretty quickly, or close to being out, and I did the same thing, laid him back down, he went down. The goal is to move away from this, so I'm still swaying, how funny is that? The goal is that I can lay him down wide awake. He's sleepy, ready for a nap, but he's awake and he goes to sleep on his own. So we're kind of progressing there. I was talking to my camera. You playing? So it's 5:30 and little boy is still sleeping. So I'm going to go ahead and wake him up, but this is good because I can get him back on my 6 p.m. schedule. Levi. Hey, little guy. Levi. Oh, oh.
Yeah.
Later than I planned. We just took a walk, so we look a little crazy. It's 90 degrees out in May. But I am about to put this one down. I'm just gonna kind of snuggle him for a minute. I'm not planning to rock him to sleep, but I did want to rock him to kind of relax and get drowsy. And then I'm gonna set him down just like I did earlier. And we're gonna see if we'll actually sleep here tonight. So it's a big move, and I'm kind of excited and nervous and dreading it all in one. Hi guys, and good morning. So it is the next morning. So little guy ended up doing pretty well. He did wake up twice in the middle of the night, so he went from once to twice. And the first one was more of like fussing, but because I was basically almost asleep, I didn't want to ignore it, and then he'd wake up in like 30 minutes to an hour once I fell asleep. So I was like, let me just go ahead, get up, go in there and feed him. Like I said, I'm pretty sure he's going through a little growth spurt, so I fed him at midnight. I didn't film it, it was just too dark in here and I didn't want to turn on any lights and risk waking him up. And then I also nursed him again when he woke up crying at 3. And then the next time he got up was around 6-ish. He's definitely hungry. He's been eating about every 3 hours. And like I said, he was going longer stretches at night. This morning, once I fed him, he was up for about an hour and then he went right back down at 7:30. So he woke up, yes, he woke up to eat around 6:30. And then at 7:30, he went back down for a nap and he went down really, really easily and he just slept now for 2 hours. So I'm gonna try and ease back our clock a little bit, but I'm honestly fine with like a 9:30, 6:30 sort of time. It may actually be better in the evenings because I can eat dinner with my family. So I actually just laid him down and I just simply rocked him for like 2 songs and then I laid him down completely wide awake but sleepy. He actually has not made a peep. He did not cry when I laid him down awake. So this is a really, really good sign. Since my son was gaining really good weight, we were only on this 4 to 8 week old schedule for a very short amount of time. He was kind of in between this schedule and the next one. So we kind of did a combination of both / transitioned him from that first one to the second one pretty quickly. Your baby is now consistently getting up at a set time. You can go ahead and pick a time that works best for you. I do recommend somewhere in the like 6 to 8 a.m. time frame. For us, that's 7 a.m. After I feed him, he does some tummy time, he does playing in his mat. I'm just basically moving him around throughout the morning as I'm going about my morning and my day with my older boys. You definitely want to keep them stimulated so that they nap longer and better. So that means their wake time now is closer to an hour and a half. So we did about an hour and 15-minute schedule. However, for most babies, I think what I've read is it's closer to an hour and a half. Just keep in mind that that 15 minutes can really make a difference in terms of how long they're sleeping. So if your baby's not sleeping long enough, try increasing that wake time just a little bit to an hour and a half. If they're waking up a little bit too early for that next feed, then go ahead and try extending that just a little bit and seeing if it takes just a few days for them to get used to that transition. That nap is going to be about an hour and a half to an hour and 45 minutes. Your goal is that they are staying asleep until they need to eat. They're not waking up an hour before or 30 minutes before. If they do, go ahead and try and soothe them back to sleep. Don't get them up if you can. Sometimes the babies are going through different developmental phases. So if your baby isn't sleeping well, just push through and hope that maybe it will pass soon, but try to stick to the schedule if you can in order to get them back on track. At around 5 and 5:30, they will actually go back down for a little cat nap. This is the nap that I've always struggled with the most. And like I mentioned, this is when you may have to resort to using a swing or wearing them just because they are their crankiest at this time of day. Your goal is to get them to sleep at the 5 p.m. time frame no matter what. So if that's wearing them, someone's holding them, or they're being rocked in a swing, you do whatever you have to do to get them to take a little bit of a cat nap. By 6 p.m., you want to make sure that they're awake so that way they can go ahead and be prepared to go back down for bed around 7 p.m. Some people push for a little bit more wake time, closer to 7:30, so do whatever works best for you and maybe pushing it until 7:30. You may just kind of need to gauge your baby and see. Moms on Call really stresses a consistent bedtime routine and they incorporate bathing your baby every day. We don't do that, but look into it to see if that's something that would work well for you. I hope that you guys found this video helpful. Again, sleep training is something that has been so incredibly impactful for my husband and I. We tell other people like it's one of the best things that we ever did for our marriage because at the end of the day, it is so great knowing that we can put our kids to sleep at the end of the day and have time together as a couple and also know that they're getting the best sleep that they can. Just remember that kids in general are hard. It's hard to wake up all throughout the night with a baby that doesn't want to sleep, and it can be hard to sleep train your child in the beginning. So choose your hard and choose what works best for your family and your situation. But just know from me, I encourage you to give it a try. Sleep training has completely changed our lives. It's something I can't recommend enough to other new moms. Stay tuned for part 2, where I will be showing you guys how I transitioned my son to a 4-hour eating schedule. Thank you guys so much for watching. Bye.